the Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 114, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Om. Vasampayana said, then, O Janamejaya, the son of Pandu started from the river Kaushiki and repaired in succession to all the sacred shrines. And, protector of men, he came to the sea where the river Ganga falls into it, and there in the center of 500 rivers, he performed the holy ceremony of a plunge. Then, O ruler of the earth, accompanied by his brothers, the valiant prince proceeded by the shore of the sea towards the land where the Kalinga tribes dwell. Lomesa said, there is the land, O Kunti's son, where the Kalinga tribes dwell. Through it passed the river Vatarni, on the banks whereof even the god of virtue performed religious rites, having first placed himself under the protection of the celestials. Verily this is the northern bank, inhabited by saints, suitable for the performance of religious rites, beautified by a hill, and frequented by persons of the regenerate caste. This spot in holiness rivals the path whereby a virtuous man, fit for going to heaven, repairs to the region inhabited by gods. And verily at this spot in former times, other saints likewise worshipped the immortals by the performance of religious rites. And at the very spot it was that the god Rudra, O king of kings, seized the sacrificial beast and exclaimed, this is my share, O chief of the descendants of Bharata. Then when the beast was carried away by Shiva, the gods spake to him saying, cast not a covetous glance at the property of others, disregarding all the righteous rules. Then they addressed words of glorification of a pleasing kind to the god Rudra. And they satisfied him by offering a sacrifice, and paid him suitable honors. Thereupon he gave up the beast, and went by the path trodden by the gods. Thereupon what happened to Rudra, learn from me, Yudhishthira. Influenced by the dread of Rudra, the gods set apart for evermore the best allotment out of all shares, such as was fresh and not stale, to be appropriated by the god. Whosoever performs his ablutions at this spot, while reciting this ancient story, beholds with his mortal eyes the path that leads to the region of the gods. Vasampayana said, then all the sons of Pandu and likewise the daughter of Drupta, all of whom were the favored of fate, descended to the river Vatarni, and made libations to the names of their fathers. Yudhishthira said, O Lomesa, how great must be the force of a pious deed. Having taken my bath at this spot in a proper form, I seem to touch no more the region inhabited by mortal men. Saint of a virtuous life, I am beholding all the regions. And this is the noise of the magnanimous dwellers of the wood, who are reciting their audible prayers. Lomesa said, O Yudhishthira, the place whence this noise comes and reaches thy ears is at the distance of 300,000 yojanas, to be sure. O Lord of men, rest thou quiet and utter no word. O King, this is the divine forest of the self-existent One, which hath now come to our view. There, O King, Viswakarma of a dreaded name performed religious rites. On the mighty occasion of that sacrifice, the self-existent One made a gift of this entire earth with all its hilly and forest tracts, to Kasyapa, by way of gratuity, for ministering as a priest. And then, Kuru's son, as soon as that goddess, earth was giving away, she became sad at heart, and wrathfully spake the following words to that great Lord, the ruler of the worlds. O mighty God, It is unworthy of thee to give me away to an ordinary mortal. And this act of gift on thy part will come to nothing, for here am I going to descend into the bottom of the nether world. Then when the blessed Saint Kasyapa beheld the goddess Earth, despondent and sad, he, O protector of men, performed a propitiatory act calculated to appease her wrath. And then, O Pandu's son, the earth was pleased with his pious deed. And she uprose again from within the waters, and showed herself in the form of a sacred altar. This, O king, is the spot which distinctly manifests the form of an altar. O great monarch, ascend over it, and thou wilt gain valor and strength. And, O king, this is the very altar which reaches as far as the sea, and rests itself upon its bosom. May good luck be thine, do thou mount hereupon, and of thyself cross the sea. And while thou this day mountest upon it, I shall administer the ceremony for averting all evil from thee. For this altar here, as soon as it gets a mortal's touch, at once enters into the sea. Salutation to the God who protects the universe. Salutation to thee that art beyond the universe. Lord of gods, vouchsafe thy presence in this sea. Pandu's son, thou must recite the following words of truth, and while so reciting, thou must quickly ascend this altar, the god of fire, and the sun, and the organ of generation, and water, and goddess and the seed of Vishnu, and the navel of nectar. The god of fire is the organ that generated the ocean, the earth is thy body, Vishnu deposited the seed that caused thy being, and thou art the navel of nectar. Thus, Pandu's son, the words of truth must be audibly recited, and while so reciting, one must plunge into the Lord of rivers most praiseworthy of Kunti's son, otherwise this Lord of waters of divine birth, this best storehouse of the waters of the earth, should not be touched, O son of Kunti, even with the end of a sacred grass. Vasampayana said, then when the ceremony for averting evil had been completed in his behalf, the magnanimous Yudhishthira went into the sea, and having performed all that the saint had bid, repaired to the skirts of the Mahendra hill, and spent the night at that spot. Thus ends the 114th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 115, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Vasampayana said, the protector of the earth spent there a single night, and with his brothers, paid the highest honors to the religious men. And Lomesa made him acquainted with the names of all of them, such as the Bhrigus, the Angiras, the Vasishthas, and the Kasyapas. And the royal saint paid visit to them all and made obeisance to them with joined palms. And then he asked the valiant Akritvana, who was a follower of Parsuma, when will the revered Parsuma show himself to the religious men here? It is desired on that occasion to obtain a sight of the descendant of Bhrigu. Akritvana said, thy journey to this spot is already known to Rama, whose soul spontaneously knows everything. And he is in every way well pleased with thee, and he will show himself readily to thee. And the saints who practice penances here, are permitted to see him on the 14th and the 8th day of the lunar course. On the morrow at the end of this very night there will set in the 14th day of the lunar course. On that occasion thou wilt have a sight of him, clad in a sable deer skin, and wearing his hair in the form of a matted mass. Yudhishthira said, thou hast been a follower of the mighty Rama, Jamdagni's son, thou must, therefore, have been the eyewitness of all the deeds achieved by him in former days. I therefore, request thee to narrate to me how the members of the military caste were vanquished by Rama on the field of battle, and what the original cause of those conflicts was. Akritvana said, "With pleasure shall I recite to thee that excellent story, Bharata's son, O chief of kings, the story of the godlike deeds of Rama, the son of Jamdagni, who traced his origin to Brigu's race. I shall also relate the achievements of the great ruler of the Highaya tribe. That king, Arjuna by name, the mighty lord of the Highaya tribe, was killed by Rama. He, O Pandu's son, was endued with 1,000 arms, and by the favor of the Tatreya he likewise had a celestial car made of gold. And, protector of the earth, his rule extended over the entire animated world, wheresoever located on this earth. And the car of that mighty monarch could proceed everywhere in an unobstructed course. And grown resistless by the virtue of a granted boon, he ever mounted on that car, trampled upon gods and yakshas and saints on all sides round. And all the born beings wheresoever placed, were harassed by him. Then the celestials and the saints of a rigidly virtuous life, met together, and thus spake to Vishnu, the god of gods, the slayer of demons, and possessed of prowess that never failed, saying, O blessed and revered Lord, for the purpose of preserving all the born beings, it is necessary that Arjuna should be killed by thee. And the mighty ruler of the Highaya tribe, placing himself on his celestial car, affronted Indra, while that deity was enjoying himself with Sachi, his queen. Then, Bharata's son, the blessed and the revered god Vishnu, held a consultation with Indra, with a view to destroying Kartavirya's son. And on that occasion, all that was for the good of the world of beings, was communicated by the Lord of gods and the blessed God worshipped by the world, to do all that was necessary, went to the delightful Vadari wood, which was his own chosen retreat for practicing penances. And at this very time there lived on the earth a mighty monarch in the land of Kanyakubja, a sovereign whose military force was exceedingly great. And his name of Gadi was famous in the world. He, however, betook himself to a forest life. And while he was dwelling in the midst of the wood, there was born to him a daughter beautiful as a nymph of heaven. And Richika, the son of Brigu, asked for her to be united with himself in marriage. And then Gadi spake to that Brahmana, who led a rigidly austere life, saying, There is a certain family custom in our race, it hath been founded by my ancestors of a bygone age. And, most excellent of the sacerdotal caste, be it known to thee that the intending bridegroom must offer a dowry consisting of 1,000 fleet steeds, whose color must be brown, and every one of whom must possess a single sable ear. But, Brigu's son, a reverend saint like thee, cannot be asked to offer the same. Nor can my daughter be refused to a magnanimous saint of thy exalted rank. Thereupon Richika said, I will give thee 1,000 fleet steeds, brown in hue and possessing a single sable ear. Let thy daughter be given in marriage to me. Akritvana said, thus having given his word, King, he went and said to Varuna, give me 1,000 fleet steeds brown in color, and each with one black ear. I want the same as dowry for my marriage. To him Varuna forthwith gave 1,000 steeds. Those steeds had issued out of the river Ganga, hence the spot hath been named, the horses' landing place. And in the city of Kanyakubja, the daughter of Gadi, Satyavati by name, was given in marriage, and the gods themselves were of the party of the bride. Richika, the most excellent of the sacerdotal caste, thus procured 1,000 steeds, and had a sight of the dwellers of heaven and won a wife in the proper form. And he enjoyed himself with the girl of slender waist, and thus gratified all the wishes and desire that he ever had. And when the marriage had been celebrated, King, his father Brigu came on a visit to see him and his wife, and he was glad to see his praiseworthy son. And the husband and wife together paid their best respects to him, who was worshipped by all the gods. And when he had seated himself, they both with joined palms, stood near him, in order that they might do his bidding. And then the revered saint, Brigu, glad at heart, thus spoke to his daughter-in-law, saying, O lovely daughter, as for a boon I am ready to grant thee any object of thy wish. And thereupon she asked for his favor in this, that a son might be born to both herself and her mother. And he vouchsafed the favor thus asked for. Brigu said, During the days that your season lasts, thou and thy mother must take a bath, with the ceremony for bringing forth a male child. And ye two must then separately embrace two different trees. She a peepal tree and thou a fig tree. And, dutiful girl, here are 2 pots of rice and milk, prepared by me with the utmost care. I having ransacked the whole universe to find the drugs, the essence whereof hath been blended with this milk and rice. It must be taken as food with the greatest care. And saying this, he vanished from sight. The 2 ladies, however, made an interchange both in the matter of the pots of rice, and likewise as regards the trees to be embraced by each. Then after the lapse of very many days, the revered saint, once more came. And he came knowing what had happened by his attribute of divine knowledge. Then Brigu, possessed of mighty strength, spake to Satyavati, his daughter-in-law, saying, O dutiful girl! My daughter of a lovely brow, the rowing pot of rice thou tookst as food. And it was the rowing tree which was embraced by thee. It was thy mother who deluded thee. A son will be born of thee, who, though of the priestly caste, will be of a character fit for the military order, while a mighty son will be born of thy mother, who, though by birth a Kshatriya, will assume a life suitable to the sacerdotal order. And his power will be great, and he will walk on the path trodden by righteous men. Then she entreated her father-in-law again and again, saying, Let not my son be of this character, but let my grandson be such. And, Pandu's son, he replied, So let it be. And thus he was pleased to grant her prayer. Then she brought forth on the expected day a son by name Jamdagni. And this son of Brigu was endowed with both splendor and grace. And he grew in years and in strength, and excelled the other saints in the proficiency of his Vedic lore. Chieftain of Bharata's race, to him, rivaling in luster the author of light, the sun, came spontaneously and without instruction the knowledge of the entire military art and of the fourfold missile arms. Thus ends the 115th section in the Tirtha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 116, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Akritvrana said, Jamdagni devoted himself to the study of the Veda and the practice of sacred penances, and became famous for his great austerities. Then he pursued a methodical course of study and obtained a mastery over the entire Veda. And, O king, he paid a visit to Prasenajit and solicited the hand of Renuka in marriage. And this prayer was granted by the king. And the delight of Brigu's race, having thus obtained Renuka for his wife, took his residence with her in a hermitage, and began to practice penances, being assisted by her. And 4 boys were born of her, with Rama for the 5th. And although the youngest, Rama was superior to all in merit. Now once upon a time, when her sons had gone out for the purpose of gathering fruits, Renuka, who had a pure and austere life, went out to bathe. And, O king, while returning home, she happened to cast her glance towards the king of Martikwata, known by the name of Chitraratha. The king was in the water with his wives, and wearing on his breast a lotus wreath, was engaged in sport. And beholding his magnificent form, Renuka was inspired with desire. And this unlawful desire she could not control, but became polluted within the water, and came back to the hermitage frightened at heart. Her husband readily perceived what state she was in, and mighty and powerful and of a wrathful turn of mind, when he beheld that she had been giddy and that the lustre of chastity had abandoned her, he reproached her by crying out, "Fie!" At that very moment came in the eldest of Jamdagni's sons, Rumanvan, and then Sushana, and then Vasu, and likewise Viswavasu. And the mighty saint directed them all one by one to put an end to the life of their mother. They, however, were quite confounded and lost heart. And they could not utter a single word. Then he in ire cursed them. And on being cursed they lost their sense and suddenly became like inanimate objects, and comparable in conduct to beasts and birds. And then Rama, the slayer of hostile heroes, came to the hermitage, last of all. Him the mighty armed Jamdagni, of great austerities, addressed, saying, "Kill this wicked mother of thine, without compunction, O my son." Thereupon Rama immediately took up an axe and therewith severed his mother's head. Then, O great king, the wrath of Jamdagni of mighty soul, was at once appeased, and well pleased. He spake the following words, "Thou hast, my boy, performed at my bidding this difficult task, being versed in virtue. Therefore, whatsoever wishes there may be in thy heart, I am ready to grant them all. Do thou ask me." Thereupon Rama solicited that his mother might be restored to life, and that he might not be haunted by the remembrance of this cruel deed, and that he might not be affected by any sin, and that his brothers might recover their former state, and that he might be unrivaled on the field of battle, and that he might obtain long life. And Bharata's son, Jamdagni, whose penances were the most rigid, granted all those desires of his son. Once, however, O Lord, when his sons had gone out as before, the valorous son of Kartavya, the lord of the country near the shore of the sea, came up to the hermitage. And when he arrived at that hermitage, the wife of the saint received him hospitably. He, however, intoxicated with a warrior's pride, was not at all pleased with the reception accorded to him, and by force and in defiance of all resistance, seized and carried off from that hermitage the chief of the cows whose milk supplied the sacred butter, not heeding the loud lowing of the cow. And he wantonly pulled down the large trees of the wood. When Rama came home, his father himself told him all that had happened. Then when Rama saw how the cow was lowing for its calf, resentment arose in his heart. And he rushed towards Kartavya's son, whose last moments had drawn nigh. Then the descendant of Brigu, the exterminator of hostile heroes, put forth his valor on the field of battle, and with sharpened arrows with flattened tips, which were shot from a beautiful bow, cut down Arjuna's arms, which numbered 1,000, and were massive like wooden bolts for barring the door. He, already touched by the hand of death, was overpowered by Rama, his foe. Then the kinsmen of Arjuna, their wrath excited against Rama, rushed at Jamdagni in his hermitage, while Rama was away. And they slew him there, for although his strength was great, yet being at the time engaged in penances, he would not fight. And while thus attacked by his foes, he repeatedly shouted the name of Rama in a helpless and piteous way. And, Yudhishthira, The sons of Kartavirya shot Jamdagni with their arrows, and having thus chastised their foe, went their way. And when they had gone away, and when Jamdagni had breathed his last, Rama, the delight of Bhrigu's race, returned to the hermitage, bearing in his arms fuel for religious rites. And the hero beheld his father who had been put to death. And grieved exceedingly he began to bewail the unworthy fate that had laid his father low. Thus ends the 116th section in the Tirthaitara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 117, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Rama said, "The blame is mine, father, that like a stag in the wood, thou hast been shot dead with arrows, by those mean and stupid wretches the sons of Kartavirya. And, father, virtuous and unswerving from the path of righteousness and inoffensive to all animated beings as thou wert, how came it to be permitted by fate that thou shouldst die in this way? What an awful sin must have been committed by them, who have killed thee with hundreds of sharpened shafts, although thou wert an aged man, and engaged in penances at the time and absolutely averse to fighting with them. With what face will those shameless persons speak of this deed of theirs to their friends and servants, viz., that they have slain an unassisted and unresisting virtuous man, protector of men?" Thus he, great in penance, bewailed much in a piteous manner, and then performed the obsequies of his departed sire. And Rama, the conqueror of hostile cities, cremated his father on the funeral pyre, and vowed, scion of Bharata's race, the slaughter of the entire military caste, and of exceeding strength in the field of battle, and possessed of valor suited to a heroic soul, and comparable to the god of death himself, he took up his weapon in wrathful mood, and single-handed put Kartavirya's sons to death. And, chieftain of the military caste, Rama, the leader of all capable of beating their foes, thrice smote down all the Kshatriya followers of Kartavirya's sons. And 7 times did that powerful lord exterminate the military tribes of the earth. In the tract of land called Samantapanchaka, 5 lakes of blood were made by him. There the mightiest scion of Bhrigu's race offered libations to his forefathers the Bhrigus, and Richika appeared to him in a visible form, and spake to him words of counsel. Then the son of Jamdagni of dreaded name, performed a mighty sacrifice and gratified the Lord of the Celestials, and bestowed the earth to the ministering priests. And, O protector of human beings, he raised an altar made of gold, 10 vyamas in breadth and 9 in height, and made a gift of the same to the magnanimous Kasyapa. Then at Kasyapa's bidding the Brahmanas divided the altar into a number of shares, and thus they became reputed as the Kandavamas, share takers. And the exterminator of the military race possessed of immense strength, bestowed the earth upon the high-souled Kasyapa, and then became engaged in penance of an exceedingly severe form. He now dwells in this Mahendra, monarch of hills. Thus did hostilities arise between him and the members of the military caste, all of them who dwelt on this earth, and Rama, endowed with immense strength, in this way subdued the entire world. Vasampayana said, then on the 14th day of the moon, the mighty-souled Rama at the proper hour showed himself to those members of the priestly caste and also to the virtuous King Yudhishthira and his younger brothers. And, King of Kings, the Lord together with his brothers, worshipped Rama, and, O most righteous of the rulers of men, the very highest honors were paid by him to all those members of the twice-born class. And after worshipping Jamdagni's son and having received words of praise from him, at his direction he spent the night on the Mahendra hill, and then started on his journey towards the southern regions. Thus ends the 117th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 118, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Vasampayana said, the magnanimous monarch pursued his journey, and at different spots on the shore of the sea visited the various bathing places, all sacred and pleasant and frequented by men of the sacerdotal caste. And, son of Parikshit, he in proper form took his bath in them together with his younger brothers and then went to an excellent river, the holiest of all. There also the magnanimous king took his plunge, and offered libations to his forefathers and the gods, and distributed riches to the leaders of the twice-born class. Then he went to the Godavari, a river that falls directly into the sea. There he was freed from his sins, and he reached the sea in the Dravida land, and visited the holy spot passing under Agastya's name, which was exceedingly sacred and exceptionally pure. And the valiant king visited the feminine sacred spots. Here he listened to the story of that well-known feat which was achieved by Arjuna, chief of all wielders of the bow, and which was beyond the power of human beings to perform. And here he was praised by the highest members of the saintly class, and the son of Pandu experienced the greatest delight. And, O protector of the earth, the ruler of the world, accompanied by Krishna bathed in those holy spots, and speaking of Arjuna's valor in laudatory terms delightfully spent his time in the place. Then he gave away thousands of cows at those holy spots on the coast of the sea, and with his brothers narrated well pleased how Arjuna had made a gift of kin. And he, king, visited one by one those holy places on the coast of the sea and many other sacred spots, and thus fulfilled his heart's desire, till he came to the holiest of all known by the name of Sarpaka. Then having crossed a certain tract on the coast of the sea, he reached a forest celebrated on earth. There the deities had practiced asceticism in former days, and likewise virtuous rulers of men had performed sacrificial rites. There he, possessed of long and lusty arms, beheld the celebrated altar of Richika's son, who was the foremost of all wielders of the bow. And the altar was girt round by hosts of ascetics, and was fit to be worshipped by persons of a virtuous life. Then the king beheld the holy and delightful shrines of all the gods and of the Vasis, and of the hosts of wind and of the two celestial physicians and of Yam, son of the sun and of the Lord of riches, and of Indra, and of Vishnu, and of the Lord Creator and of Shiva, and of the moon, and of the author of day, and of the Lord of waters, and of the host of Sadhyas, and of Brahma, and of the forefathers, and of Rudra together with all his followers, and of the goddess of learning, and of the host of Siddhas, and of many immortal holy gods besides. And in those shrines the king observed various fasts, and gave away large quantities of gems. He plunged his body in all the holy spots, and then came again to Sarpaka. And he by the same landing place of the sea again proceeded with his uterine brothers, and came over to the holy spot Prabhasa, whereof fame hath been spread by mighty Brahmanas throughout the world. There he, possessed of a pair of large red eyes, washed himself with all his younger brothers, and offered libations to the forefathers and the celestial hosts, and so did Krishna and all those Brahmanas together with Lomisa. For 12 days he subsisted upon air and water. And he performed ablutions for days and nights and surrounded himself with fires kindled on all sides. Thus that greatest of all virtuous men engaged himself in asceticism. While he was acting thus, Information reached both Valarma and Krishna that the king was practicing penances of a most austere form, and these two leaders of the entire Vrishni tribe accompanied with troops came to Yudhishthira of a Jamidar's race. And when the Vrishnis beheld that the sons of Pandu lay down on the ground, their bodies besmeared all over with dirt, and when they beheld the daughter of Drupta in a sad state, their grief was great and they could not refrain from breaking out in loud lamentations. Then the king, whose courage was such that misfortune never could cast him down, cordially met Rama and Krishna and Samvan, Krishna's son, and the grandson of Sini and other Vrishnis, and paid honor to them in a suitable form. And they also in return paid honor to all the sons of Pritha, and were similarly honored by Pandu's sons. And they seated themselves round about Yudhishthira, as round Chandra, king, are seated the celestial hosts. And highly pleased, he recounted to them all the machinations of his adversaries, and how also he had resided in the forest, and how Arjuna had gone to Indra's abode in order to learn the science of arms. All this he related with a gladdened heart. And they were happy to learn all this news from him, but when they saw the Pandavas so exceedingly lean, the majestic and magnanimous Vrishnis could not forbear shedding tears, which spontaneously gushed from their eyes on account of the agony they felt. Thus ends the 118th section in the Tirthaitara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 119, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Janamejaya said, O thou of ascetic wealth, when the sons of Pandu and the Vrishnis reached the holy spot Prabhasa, what did they do and what conversation was held there by them? For all of them were of mighty souls, proficient in all the branches of science, and both the Vrishnis and the sons of Pandu held one another in friendly estimation. Vasampayana said, when the Vrishnis reached the holy spot Prabhasa, the sacred landing place on the coast of the sea, they surrounded the sons of Pandu and waited upon them. Then Valarma, resembling in hue the milk of the cow and the kunda flower and the moon and the silver and the lotus root, and who wore a wreath made of wild flowers and who had the plowshare for his arms, spake to the lotus-eyed one, saying, O Krishna, I do not see that the practice of virtue leads to any good or that unrighteous practices can cause evil, since the magnanimous Yudhishthira is in this miserable state, with matted hair, a resident of the wood, and for his garment wearing the bark of trees. And Duryodhan is now ruling the earth, and the ground doth not yet swallow him up. From this, a person of limited sense would believe a vicious course of life is preferable to a virtuous one. When Duryodhan is in a flourishing state and Yudhishthira, robbed of his throne, is suffering thus, what should people do in such a matter? This is the doubt that is now perplexing all men. Here is the Lord of men sprung from the God of virtue, holding fast to a righteous path, strictly truthful and of a liberal heart. This son of Pritha would give up his kingdom and his pleasure, but would not swerve from the righteous path, in order to thrive. How is it that Bhishma and Kripa and the Brahmana Drona and the aged king, the senior member of the house, are living happily, after having banished the sons of Pritha? Fie upon the vicious-minded leaders of Bharata's race! What will that sinner, the chieftain of the earth, say to the departed forefathers of his race, when the wretch will meet them in the world to come? Having hurled from the throne his inoffensive sons, will he be able to declare that he had treated them in a blameless way? He doth not now see with his mind's eye how he hath become so sightless, and on account of what act he hath grown blind among the kings of this entire earth. Is it not because he hath banished Kunti's son from his kingdom? I have no doubt that Vichitravirya's son, when he with his sons perpetrated this inhuman act, beheld on the spot where dead bodies are burnt, flowering trees of a golden hue. Verily he must have asked them, when those stood before him with their shoulders projected forward towards him, and with their large red eyes staring at him, and he must have listened to their evil advice, since he fearlessly sent away Yudhishthira to the forest, who had all his weapons of war with him and was borne company by his younger brothers. This Bhima here, whose voracious appetite is like that of a wolf, is able to destroy with the sole strength of his powerful arms, and without the help of any weapons of war, a formidable array of hostile troops. The forces in the field of battle were utterly unmanned on hearing his war cry. And now the strong one is suffering from hunger and thirst, and is emaciated with toilsome journeys. But when he will take up in his hand arrows and divers other weapons of war, and meet his foes in the field of battle, he will then remember the sufferings of his exceedingly miserable forest life, and kill his enemies to a man. Of a certainty do I anticipate this. There is not throughout the whole world a single soul who can boast of strength and prowess equal to his. And his body, alas, is emaciated with cold, and heat and winds. But when he will stand up for fight, he will not leave a single man out of his foes. This powerful hero, who is a very great warrior when mounted on a car, this Bhima, of appetite rivaling a wolf's, conquered single-handed all the rulers of men in the east, together with those who followed them in battle, and he returned from those wars safe and uninjured. And that same Bhima, miserably dressed in the bark of trees, is now leading a wretched life in the woods. This powerful Sahdeva vanquished all the kings in the south, those lords of men who had gathered on the coast of the sea. Look at him now in an anchorite's dress. Valiant in battle, Nakula vanquished single-handed the kings who ruled the regions towards the west, and he now walks about the wood, subsisting on fruit and roots, with a matted mass of hair on the head, and his body besmeared all over with dirt. This daughter of a king, who is a great soldier when mounted on a car, took her rise from beneath the altar, during the pomp of sacrificial rites. She hath been always accustomed to a life of happiness. How is she now enduring this exceedingly miserable life in this wood? And the son of the god of virtue, virtue which stands at the head of all the three pursuits of life, and the son of the wind god, and also the son of the lord of celestials, and those two sons of the celestial physicians, being the sons of all those gods and always accustomed to a life of happiness, how are they living in this wood deprived of all comforts? When the son of virtue met with defeat, and when his wife, his brothers, his followers, and himself were all driven forth, and Duryodhan began to flourish, why did not the earth subside with all its hills? Thus ends the 119th section in the Tirtha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 120, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Satyaki said, O Rama, this is not the time of lamentation. Let us do that which is proper and suited to the present occasion, although Yudhishthira doth not speak a single word. Those who have persons to look after their welfare do not undertake anything of themselves, they have others to do their work, as C.I.E and others did for Yayati. Likewise, O Rama, those who have appointed functionaries to undertake their work on their own responsibility, as the leaders of men, they may be said to have real patrons, and they meet with no difficulty, like helpless beings. How is it that when the sons of Pritha have for their patrons these two men, Rama and Krishna, and the two others, Pradyumna and Samvan, together with myself, these patrons being able to protect all the three worlds, how is it that the son of Pritha is living in the wood with his brothers? It is fit that this very day the army of the Dasrahas should march out, variously armed and with checkered mails. Let Dhritarashtra's sons be overwhelmed with the forces of the Vrishnis, and let them go with their friends to the abode of the god of death. Let him alone who wields the bow made of the horn, Krishna, thou alone, if roused, wouldst be able to surround even the whole of this earth. I ask thee to kill Dhritarashtra's son with all his men, as the great Indra, the lord of the gods, killed Vritra. Arjuna, the son of Pritha, is my brother, and also my friend, and also my preceptor, and is like the second self of Krishna. It is for this that men desire for a worthy son, and that preceptor seeks a pupil who would contradict him not. It is for this that the time is come for that excellent work, which is the best of all tasks and difficult to perform. I shall baffle Duryodhana's volleys of arms by my own excellent weapons. I shall overpower all in the field of battle. I shall in my wrath cut off his head with my excellent shafts, little inferior to snakes and poison and fire. And with the keen edge of my sword, I shall forcibly sever his head from the trunk, in the field of battle. Then I shall kill his followers, and Duryodhana, and all of Kuru's race. O son of Rohini! Let the followers of Bhima look at me with joy at their heart, when I shall keep up the weapons of war in the field of battle, and when I shall go on slaying all the best fighting men on the side of the Kurus, as at the end of time, fire will burn vast heaps of straw. Kripa and Drona and Vikarna and Kama are not able to bear the keen arrows shot by Pradyumna. I know the power of Arjuna's son. He conducts himself like the son of Krishna in the field of battle. Let someone chastise by the force of his arms Dasasana, let him destroy by force Dasasana and his charioteer and his car. In the field of battle, when the son of Jambavati becomes irresistible in fight, there is nothing which can withstand his force. The army of the demon Sambara was speedily routed by him when only a boy. By him was killed in fight Aswachakra, whose thighs were round, and whose muscular arms were of exceeding length. Who is there that would be able to go forward to the car of someone, who is great in fight, when mounted on a car? As a mortal coming under the clutches of death can never escape, so who is there that once coming under his clutches in the field of battle, is able to return with his life? The son of Vasudeva will burn down by the volleys of his fiery shafts all the hostile troops, and those two warriors, Bhishma and Drona, who are great on a car, and Somadeta surrounded by all his sons. What is there in all the worlds including the gods, which Krishna cannot encounter on an equal footing, when he takes up the weapons of war, wields in his hands excellent arrows, arms himself with his dice, and thus becomes unrivaled in fight? Then let Aniruddha also take up in his hand his buckler and sword, and let him cover the surface of the earth with Dhritarashtra's sons, their heads separated from their trunks, their bodies devoid of all consciousness, as in a sacrificial rite the altar is overspread with sacred grass placed upon the same. And Gada and Bluka, and Vahuka and Bhanu and Nitha and the young Nishatha valiant in battle and Sarna, and Charudeshna, irresistible in war, let them perform feats befitting their race. Let the united army of the Satwathas and Suras, together with the best soldiers of the Vrishnis, the Bhojas, and the Andakas, kill those sons of Dhritarashtra in the field of battle, and let them swell their expanded fame throughout the world. Then let Abhimanyu rule the world so long as this most excellent of virtuous men, the magnanimous Yudhishthira, may be engaged in fulfilling his vow, the vow that was accepted and declared by him, the most righteous of Kuru's race, on the occasion of the famous play at Dice. Afterwards the virtuous king will protect the earth, all his foes defeated in battle by shafts which will be discharged by us. Then there will remain no sons of Dhritarashtra on earth, nor the son of the charioteer, Karna. This is the most important work for us to do, and this will surely lead to fame. Krishna said, O scion of the race of Madhu, no doubt what thou sayest is true, we accept thy words, thou of courage that is never weak. But this bull of the Kuru race, Yudhishthira, would never accept the sovereignty of the earth, unless it were won by the prowess of his own arms. Neither for the sake of pleasure, nor from fear, nor from covetousness, would Yudhishthira ever renounce the rules of the caste, nor would these two heroes, who are mighty, when mounted on a car, Bhima and Arjuna, nor the twin brothers, nor Krishna, the daughter of Drupta. He possessing the appetite of a wolf, Bhima, and the winner of riches, Arjuna, are both unrivaled in fight throughout the world. And why should not this king rule over the entire world when he hath the two sons of Madri to espouse his cause? The high-souled ruler of Panchala together with the Kekya king, and we also should put forth our united strength, and then would the enemies of Yudhishthira be annihilated. Yudhishthira said, It is not strange that thou shouldst speak thus, O scion of Madhu's race. But to me truth seems to be the first consideration, above that of my sovereign power itself. But it is Krishna alone who precisely knoweth what I am, and it is I alone who precisely know what Krishna really is. Thou endued with valor, O scion of Madhu's race, as soon as he will perceive that the time is come for feats of bravery, then, most valiant of Sini's race, he also of beautiful hair, Krishna, will defeat Suyodhana. Let the brave men of the Dasraha race go back today. They are my patrons, and the foremost of human beings, they have visited me here. O ye of immeasurable strength! Never fall off from the path of virtue. I shall see you again, when ye will be happily gathered together. Then after mutual greeting and obeisance to seniors, and having embraced the youthful, those valiant men of the Yadu race and the sons of Pandu separated, and the Yadus returned to their home, and the Pandavas continued their journey to the sacred spots. Then having parted with Krishna, the virtuous king, accompanied by his brothers and servants, and also by Lomisa, went to the sacred river Payosini. Its fine landing place was constructed by the king of Vidarbha, and he began to dwell on the banks of the Payosini, whose waters were mingled with the distilled soma juice. There the high-souled Yudhishthira was greeted with excellent laudatory terms by numerous leaders of the twice-born class, who were delighted to see him there. Thus ends the 120th section in the Tirthaitara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 121, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Lomesa said, O king, when the Nriga performed a sacrifice here, he gratified Indra, the demolisher of hostile cities, by offering the soma juice. And Indra was refreshed and was very much pleased. Here the gods together with Indra, and the protectors of all born beings, celebrated sacrifices of various kinds on a large scale, and paid abundant gratuities to the ministering priests. Here King Amaterasu, the lord of the world, satisfied Indra, the holder of the thunderbolt, by the offer of the soma juice, when 7 horse sacrifices were performed by that king. The articles which in other sacrificial rites are uniformly made of the timber, wood and of earth, were all made of gold in the 7 sacrifices performed by him. And it is said that in all those rites, 7 sets of stakes, rings for the sacrificial stakes, spots, ladles, utensils, spoons were prepared by him. On each sacrificial stake, 7 rings were fastened at the top. And, O Yudhishthira, the celestials together with Indra, themselves erected the sacrificial stakes of shining gold which had been prepared for his sacred rites. In all those magnificent sacrifices instituted by Gaia, the protector of the earth, Indra, was delighted by drinking the soma juice, and the ministering priests were gratified with the gratuities paid to them. And the priests obtained untold wealth counted out to them. And as the sand grains of the earth, or as the stars in the sky, or as the raindrops when it raineth, cannot be counted by any one, so the wealth Gaia gave away was incapable of being counted by figures. So untold was the wealth, great king, that was given to the ministering priests in all those 7 sacrifices that even the above-mentioned objects might be counted by figures, but the gratuities bestowed by him whose largeness exceeded all that was known before were not capable of being counted by figures. And images of the goddess of speech were made of gold by the sculptor of the gods, and the king gratified the members of the sacerdotal caste, who had arrived from all the cardinal points, by making presents to them of those images, of gold. Protector of men. When the high soul Gaia performed his sacrificial rites, he erected sacrificial piles at so many different spots that but little space was left on the surface of the earth. And, O scion of Bharata's race, he by that sacred act attained the regions of Indra. Whoever should bathe in the river Payosini, would go to the regions attained by Gaia. Therefore, O Lord of Kings, O unswerving Prince, thou and thy brothers should bathe in this river, then, O protector of the earth, thou wilt be freed from all these sins. Vasampayana said, O most praiseworthy of men, Yudhishthira with his brothers performed ablutions in the Payosini river. Then, sinless prince, the powerful monarch together with his brothers, journeyed to the hill of sapphires and the great river Narmada. The blessed Saint Lomisa there named to him all the delightful holy spots and all the sacred shrines of the celestials. Then he with his brothers visited those places, according to his desire and convenience. And at various places Brahmanas by thousands received gifts from him. Lomisa said, O son of Kunti, one who visits the sapphire hill and plunges his body in the river Narmada attains the regions inhabited by the celestials and kings. Most praiseworthy of men. This period is the junction between the Treta and the Kali age, O Kunti's son. This is the period when a person gets rid of all his sins. Respected sir, this is the spot where C.I.E performed sacrificial rites, wherein Indra appeared in a visible form and drank the soma juice, with the 2 celestial physicians. And Bhrigus son of severe austerities conceived anger towards the great Indra, and the mighty Chavna paralyzed Tindra, and for his wife obtained the princess, Sukanya. Yudhishthira said, how was the chastiser of the demon Paka, the god possessed of the 6 attributes, paralyzed by Chavna? And for what reason did the mighty saint conceive wrath towards Indra? And how, O Brahmana, did he raise the celestial physicians to the rank of the drinkers of Soma? All this, precisely as it happened, thy venerable self will be pleased to recount to me. Thus ends the 121st section in the Tirthaitara Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, Please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.